All right, it is Sunday, the weekend of January 7th, and welcome to the Trader Hub Weekly Market Review. Let's go ahead and look at the price action for the indexes this week, starting with the NQ. Big continuation down this week after last week's kind of sort of kept grinding up and then kind of gave some of it back, ended a little bit below kind of the area that it had gained, and we saw some follow through with that this week. So we lost kind of a key level that had been gained on the lower time frames, and that's kind of why we made a new low here. So potentially, even though this move, if we look on the weekly chart, is super extended, there is a lot that we could give back and still maintain this uptrend, right? So if this was the low, we just put in a new higher high that was above the previous all-time high, we could give a lot of this back and still make a higher low. So to keep that in mind, when we talk about having lost these levels, what we'll probably see is some level of attempt to move back in the short term. Things are somewhat oversold in the short term. That doesn't mean we couldn't see lower, but it would be totally normal and to be expected to kind of make a move back up before any continuation down if we do get that. We've identified kind of some key potential levels for that. It does look a little bit easier on the 4-hour to look at. So we can see kind of where we've used these levels as support in the past, kind of consolidated briefly below that area and then moved down, so we could see that area as a potential good place for a swing short lower if we are going to see lower. Could also attempt to move back higher toward the area that was lost that caused the initial bigger dump back up here around 17,000-ish. That kind of is the last area to look for, probably the strongest position from price action wise of a swing short here. But if that area is regained, I would expect to see continuation higher after that. So that's kind of what we're looking at. These levels maybe around 16,750 and around 17,000 even. We'll have to kind of see if price can make it back up there, if it's going to continue lower from there, or just keep moving higher. But those are the only kind of ways that I would look to play this short. We could even just see this pop through higher or even continue further down. If it does continue down, I know this is a lot, but it's beginning of the year, kind of talking about things to look at here. I think that down here at 16,080-ish is a good area to start accumulating along. There is a lot of price interest at that area. We've seen it tap there last time in July last year, and also that's where the accumulation occurred before this recent run up as well. So that looks like a strong area for any long trades to start taking some trades. But again, we could lose some significant levels here and still look like an uptrend on the weekly. So anywhere down here between 16,000 and 15,000 could still be great longs for a breakout to new highs. What do you think about that price? You see anything else? Anything I missed?
Yeah. It looks similarly to me. Just that these are great levels to look at for shorts as the price comes back up. Because this was the level that produced the high, and now we're below that. So that's where you're going to want to be looking for a short. And it's kind of a picture perfect short setup there. So it's a great short there, and we should see lower, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll see below 14,000 here. We're still looking for a hold here in the range.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if this, we're talking about, while we're on the subject of potentially shorting there, even if it comes there and doesn't play out, that's still a good short setup. It's not something that if it doesn't work out that it would be like, oh well, we went against trend. It's like, no, the price action actually suggests right now to me that is a good short, and you could take a really good risk to reward trade at that area, So, if you're going to target a lower low, lower than that low, that's almost 5-1. So, right. Absolutely worth trying to take that. Let's see if there's any difference on the S&P chart, and there really isn't, right? It had probably the most catching up to do compared to the other indexes, which you'll see when we go over the Dow as well. But we had kind of noted that it had just tapped out against its previous all-time high, did make a new all-time high, and then kind of did the same thing where it puttered out, lost levels, and now we're below the last higher low. So now we're made a lower low, and we'd be looking for, I think, right here, kind of 47.90-ish is kind of where you see that level right there kind of really get lost. that to me would be another area for a potentially great short as well. And you'd kind of be targeting down right here, probably 4,600-ish. Again, which would also end up at a great place to start accumulating a swing long. That's kind of what I see. I mean, there's a little bit more minutia in this chart, but it's pretty much the same concept as the NASDAQ, so I won't really kind of go into greater detail on that. I feel like we've covered the same things on the NASDAQ. But do you see anything that stands out to you that's a little bit different?
Just that it looks like there was already an entry right there on Friday for a good short setup. Yeah, you can see it a little better there.
Yeah.
On the 4 hour.
Yeah, that looks clean.
So it is an interesting high that's been created here, but you know, we haven't seen anything overly impressive on the long side yet. This could very easily just keep creating new lows. There's nothing saying this is more likely to go up on the 4 hour, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, regardless of the fact that some of these lower time frames look like they could be the start of a reversal, I think that it's just going to end up giving a chance for a higher short. I still think the price action, until we regain essentially 4,800 here, it doesn't look like, you know, we're back to bullish territory in the short term. But again, just want to keep reiterating, that does not mean that we're not going up in the long term. I think the weekly charts will look very bullish until they lose pretty significant levels, probably even 4,400 on this chart, something like that. It would really need to dump here for that to lose the bullish uptrend. So yeah, looking for shorts in the short term, looking for longs in the long term. What do you think about the RTY? Small caps look any different to you?
Well, they did come down a little bit further. It looks like came down and didn't come back up. So that's fairly interesting. But you know, just like you were saying on the weekly here, it still looks like a normal pullback. Nothing here is unexpected. I think we could see it come down to 1890 and still be pretty bullish on the weekly there. You know, that's down in this zone here, which on the daily makes perfect sense as well. It would make a lot of sense to come down below this low or even that low right there before continuing up. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we had also mentioned previously that, you know, we're starting to reach up into these areas that were previously very significant support before, you know, the drawdown in 22, and that it made sense that this was going to be a really large area of resistance and a key area to gain, and that we thought that it would make a lot of sense to kind of get there, tap it, cool off, come back down somewhere in this area for support to then break through. And, you know, that thesis is playing out, at least up to this point. It looks like that is very much what happened. Technically, I would consider that, even though that is like a bearish pin bar looking candle, that is a close above the level that we've identified. So in the candle below, or sorry, previous also closed above. So that's our two closes above that we like to talk about for potentially gaining that area. So that to us tells us that we should be looking for a higher low to then make a new higher high, higher than that high. So yeah, I totally agree with your level. We have it marked out at 1900 even, essentially. Anything below that, you know, if you want to look at the wicks, like you were saying, 1890 looks as good as any level. You can see a lot of support from that in the past as well. So yeah, I pretty much totally agree with you. I think that we'll probably end up coming down a little bit further and then blasting higher. So that's pretty much
that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. What do you think about gold? Gold has been surprisingly holding up pretty good.
Yeah, it did pretty well. You see that weekly, it did, you know, came down and did very normal things without breaking any levels. It was bought back up. You know, and here on the daily, it's just coming back down to this level here that broke. Again, super normal. I think that could have been the low there on this leg, and it could very well be on its way back up. It looks pretty bullish here to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I still I just think there's so much strength in gold. I think that this area down here was probably the swing low of this particular move. Some people that I've talked to are a little bit more bearish on gold. They think that we could see move kind of closer to 1975-ish before moving up, kind of like a rounding bottom look. But I think that just based on price action alone, and like you pointed out, this wick down here, I mean, technically it did wick in two directions. That was like a maximum confusion kind of day, but holding the range still says something, because we are at a higher range than, you know, previously. So
Right.
there's a lot of exchanging of contracts going on up here, and that just tells me that there's healthy buying and selling up here. Price action alone just looks like we keep making, you know, higher highs, higher lows. This is kind of an equal high look if you want to consider closes and not wicks, but really this is kind of just consolidation, and it kind of just drifting back up. So I don't see any reason to be bearish on gold at all right now, either the short or the long term. So let's go ahead and move on to the Dow. Actually had, again, more of a... This has been way more resilient than the NASDAQ or the S&P. You know, it had this kind of relief candle on Wednesday, December 20th. And that ended up holding up on Friday, whereas the other indexes ended up making kind of new lows. This is more of an equal low look, and even got bought up, and even though it closed red, it's still kind of closed above kind of the low there. So I mean, this to me looks like we could either just see some sideways consolidation, or it could continue moving up until we lose this area here, 37,480. Then that's when we start considering looking for, okay, more bearish momentum to the downside. But you know, the Dow really hasn't lost anything in my eyes, unlike the other charts. What do you think?
Well, it's not as, it's a little difficult there to see, but I think what they've done is they've gone below this section here. So price came up, went down, made a new high, which I believe that's all-time high at the time, right?
Yeah,
and then
it was.
Came down a new high. So now we're down below this level, and that was a short entry there. And so I think that just played out, and I think there's a good chance we'll see lower lows.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, anything could happen at this area.
So
Makes sense.
Let's look at the weekly. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Looks pretty good to come
targeting
down
that
to.
consolidation. I mean, that would be
Yeah.
a great risk to reward ratio trade as well. So cool.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm glad I asked. Oil. Let's talk about oil. I think we talked about potentially start of a reversal if this area held. We did kind of see that play out this week. So I would like to see a little bit more continuation, and I have this level marked here at 75, 75.70-ish. If we can get closes above that, we could kind of confirm the first kind of higher low, higher high look here for the potential start of a bullish reversal here. That idea is, and I think we talked about this last time, predicated on this area from mid-December down in like 67, 68-ish being the low of this swing down. But we're starting to get into some areas where there's some great long opportunities on oil. If we do clear above this area, we'll just call it 76, I guess. If we can close above there and touch 80, come back to one of these levels down here, we'll have a great setup for some longs. If you didn't already catch this long down here at 70-ish or to the 69s, I think that oil's about to kind of pop off this year, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that absolutely right here could be the start of a new leg up, and that leg could be, quite the leg. Trying to struggle.
Well, if that's a higher low, right? If that's what we're considering a higher low, then we would be looking to make a higher than the previous high at 93, and we don't see another level until like 100. So it would be a significant move. If you were in here, like let's say what is this, 73, 74? If it went to 100 from there, that's probably what, 45%. That's a big trade. It's a good trade if that ends up being correct. Yeah, 40% to 100. That's good. Anyway, I just think that oil might be something that people are sleeping on. I think it looks good, and I think this is like the perfect fake out move to be like, okay, well, oil's back in the low range now. Let's ignore it. Like this could be a good trade, a really good trade.
You can see how bullish it looks on the 4 hour. Just
yep,
it's already produced that higher high, a higher low, and higher high again.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at that there, I think if it came back down to 73, you take a long there, that would be nice.
Yep, it does look like a good long.
Like 73 even almost, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, looks good. I mean, we'll have to see if we get follow through and can break above that area that we marked out. Let's go ahead and talk about the dollar. What do you think about the dollar?
Well, I mean that's a pretty wild day there on the dollar. It's fairly bullish to me. We're up above this level. We're up above this level, and these were previous levels that tried to hold but produced new lows. So right here tried to hold but it produced a new low. Right here it tried to hold but it produced a new low. So now that we're up above them, they're good support zones. And that's how you know that the trend is starting to go back upward. Because if it were going to just continue down, we would have done that. It would have come up, tested, and then rejected, and we would continue down. But we haven't. We've gone up. So this higher high here is pretty wild. That's a very, just look at that guy right there. Mm-hmm. That's pretty interesting.
Well, it's a big swing day for the dollar. Mm-hmm. I mean, the dollar doesn't make intraday swings like that very often. Usually it's one direction.
To me, that really looks like people getting out of shorts. I don't know. That's what that looks like to me. But on the 4 hour, you can see how it's just coming down. It came down to a normal level, and it came right back up above. So you can kind of ignore these immediate downs and right back up, because on the daily, it's just a wick. And so there's nothing there to be afraid of if you're looking at this long, wondering why did it sell off. That looks good for a buy in my opinion.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. I do think that we could see a little bit more downside, not lower lows, but I think we could see this pull back somewhere in this range. Mm-hmm. And then kind of bounce off there to new highs, to higher highs on the shorter time frames. I think that would make a lot of sense. If we're going to move back up, there will be an area of confusion, and I think that kind of right in there looks pretty good. 101.8. I do also want to just mention that I think that we talked about, we really wanted 100.8. Like if you wanted to maintain the higher low look on the higher time frame, particularly the weekly chart, that you really wanted it to hold there. And I think you mentioned in particular that we were really looking to see essentially a wick down into there and closing above that level, which is essentially exactly what we got. We talked about that last time, and looking for a move higher, which is something that we've got. So I think that if we can keep moving higher and kind of close above maybe 103, that'll be, even on the higher time frames, looking like the start of a confirmation toward making potentially a higher high moving forward. So I personally really think that this is very bullish for the dollar. I think the dollar is going to eventually hit we've been talking about 109.6 for a long time, but I think that is the next area that makes sense. Maybe a little pit stop up here at 108, but there's a lot of wicking in there. But I mean, if this plays out as a higher low, makes sense. Higher than the last high, which is topped out at like 107. So that would make sense that we'd be going in the direction that we talked about. Anyway.
No, calling 108 on this leg, if that is the low there at that wick, makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, well, this, even if we are right, the dollar isn't going to, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that. It's going to rip higher that fast? No, probably not. It'll probably take probably half a year, 3 months, half a year, maybe longer to play out if that ends up playing out. But that's kind of, we look at the dollar for long term anyway. So I think that there's a really good chance that we do make a higher than this high this year. We'll have to see. In the banks, not too much to talk about. Just more continuation of consolidating at higher levels. It is interesting that we are kind of really holding this area. Technically on the daily, we've started to make a series of, like in the short term, lower highs and lower lows, but these are all consolidations occurring at higher areas on the higher time frames. I think we talked about potentially coming back to 48 or even 45, putting in a higher low, and then coming back up to 56. Nothing about that prediction has changed to me. What do you think?
Yeah, this whole high 40s zone right here, just below 50, it looks like a great long. And the fact that it's just kind of going sideways a little bit and not completely selling off is pretty bullish to me. I think there's a good chance it could just go from here where it is. But if you were looking for a good long, anywhere below $50 looks like a really good long.
I'd be in at 49.
Yeah.
So, yeah, looks good. Cool. Well, I don't think there's anything else to cover. Interesting week. We'll have to see if there's any continuation to the downside for these major indexes moving forward. But anyway, that's it for now. Thanks again for tuning into the Trader Hub Weekly Market Review. If you like this kind of content, sub to the Hub and consider joining our Trader Hub Discord community server. You can find it using our link in the description. See you next week.
Till next time.